Hello, what's up?
What's up? Here we go. Welcome back. Week three of Coordinating Chaos. Super excited. Hopefully, this has been helpful for those that have been watching. And actually, this is the final week of our live broadcast of Coordinating Chaos, but it's not the last video. We have one more video that's going to go live in the next week, 7 to 10 days. It is the holiday season, so more than likely it'll happen before Christmas. It'll definitely happen before Christmas, but it won't be a live broadcast. We'll just let people know the course is complete. It's actually the last session is actually, I want to say it's not maybe the most important, but it's like when I thought up of this whole course idea breakout or whatever, it was that fourth session that we're going to do was the idea. So these three that we've recorded were all additional issues, but I'm excited about the next one. So you have to stay tuned, and you should have it in about a week.
We didn't think a live session for the fourth one would be that great 2-3 days before people were doing Christmas services.
No, well, and
The
actually,
week of Christmas.
this is for the few of you who are watching this live, and that you're watching this. This is we're going to pull the curtain back a little bit, is because as we started planning this, we're like, okay, we're gonna cover this topic in 3 sessions, and then as we got close to launching this, we realized, you know what, this would be better as 4. But we'd already
Yeah.
promoted that we're doing 3 live sessions, so that's actually the
Bonus.
reason why.
Bonus.
It's a
Well, yeah,
bonus, but it's not
that's
really.
true. That's true, but it's also that we didn't feel like doing the fourth one live Wednesday before Christmas was going to be,
No,
something anybody
no,
watched
no.
the week of Christmas.
No. And the
Maybe.
reality is 98.7% of all the people who watch this course will watch it asynchronous at some
On
point in time.
demand.
So it doesn't
True.
matter. This is for those of you beautiful people who purchased the Black Friday deal, or some of our amazing members who are jumping in on this. So it's all for you. This is all for you. But for everybody else, you'll just get it as it drops, or as you open up this course and start taking it. So cool. Well, today we're going to cover the third issue, which we're going to be talking about frequency, which is funny. We'll get into this in just a second, but I'm not going to actually say this in our breakout, but it was really hard in the last 2 sessions, and both talking about quantity volunteers, quality volunteers. It kept in both of those topics. I kept talking about weekly, but without going too much into it. But this is a session where we're going to really unpack getting your volunteers to serve weekly. So, which is a course that Nick has here at Ministry Boost. So if you haven't
That's true.
done the deep dive into that, that's the course you want to do.
You ready to go?
Yeah, of course.
Are you going to talk about your current church in the session, or is that going to be something I ask you about post? Both? What are we doing here? I
Yeah,
think you should.
it's one of those things. Like, so okay, so this is another funny thing. This is off the record, but like sometimes I go back. Recently, I've gone back and I've watched some of my other courses, and they were like, "Hi, my name's Kenny. I'm the next gen pastor at Mission Community Church." It was like, that was 3 years ago. I'm not I'm not there anymore. So it's
The
like
two
there's a part of
jobs
it that it's
removed.
like, yeah, I'm trying to do I talk about what I'm doing right now, because does that date me, or because that's what it was. I was actually looking at the Bridging the Volunteer Gap course, and I talked about, like, 2 years ago I had to do this at my own church, and I was like, no, that was like 5 years ago now. So
I think it's
don't
fine. What you do
know.
is you don't say that, like, currently at my church, right?
Yeah,
Like that's or the church in this case. It's more like the church you're working with. You
yeah.
know, I mean,
Yeah, because
obviously the same
so
thing, but
the spoiler here is that I'm literally doing this right now. Like, what I'm teaching. We've done it in the past. I've done it at previous churches, but I'm literally doing this right now with current volunteers. So it
we
is very
we
fresh.
practice what we preach. That's one of the things that I
We
think is
do.
good about what we
Well,
do is we
see,
actually do it.
here's the thing, though. Here's the truth. Again, the pulling the curtain back is that Nick did this once, like 12 years ago, and he's continues to reap the benefits from it.
Oh yeah, probably more
Me,
than 12
I
years
keep
ago.
I keep starting over and coming to churches and like, y'all need this, and I do it like every 3 years. I get to practice what I preach.
Yes, that's true. That's true. I reap what I preach, what I
That's
practiced
right.
long ago. Although
That's
plenty
right.
of stuff we preach, we always have to keep. You never stop doing. So volunteer
No,
recruiting,
it's true.
empowering
You
coaches,
don't.
leaders, like a lot of things, it just never stops. But this is one of those ones where, if you set this up right, you don't really redo it.
Mm-mm.
5 years
It's
later.
just the default of like, oh, hey, you're coming to serve. All right, we'll see you every week. Just
Yeah.
like okay. So it's
Yep.
great.
All
Okay,
right. You
I'm
ready
ready
to
whenever
go?
you are. I'm
All right.
I'm ready to go.
Here we go.
All right, everybody, welcome back. My name's Kenny. I'm your host here at Coordinating Chaos. And in this course, we are talking about the nightmare, the frustration, the pain of your life, which is the volunteer scheduling process at your church. Of it's a nightmare. It's an endless cycle that repeats week after week after week after week. And so, and what we've been talking about is that it doesn't have to actually be this way. Like we can actually find freedom from this seemingly endless cycle, and that's what we're talking about here. So freedom is just around the corner. It's possible. You can tame your volunteer schedule. So in our first session, we talked about what our approach was. This approach to core issues that tend to pop up. It's like for most of us, we will have two or three of these four issues. But if we solve these four issues, our schedule, the roster will become tame. But here's the thing to remember. Okay, you can't forget this. This isn't easy. There's no quick fixes. There's no shortcuts. There's no silver bullets. But as we begin to put these things into practice, we begin to solve these issues, you're going to see some results in the matter of weeks. Maybe at this point in the course, you've already begun to see some results. And this is good because once you see progress, it's going to encourage you to keep going. Okay, so let's dive into another issue in this session. We're talking about issue number 3, the volunteer frequency issue. Okay, now this issue is really easy to define. you know, there's a number of volunteers that you need for your weekend schedule. Now, it might be 15 volunteers, could be 150 volunteers. Regardless, you have to find enough willing human beings to fill all these spots. However, there's more than one way to fill all these spots. Let's do an example, okay? Let's say you need 25 volunteers, okay? You need 25 volunteers to make Sunday happen. There's a lot of ways that you can fill those 25 volunteer spots. You could fill those 25 volunteer spots with once a month volunteers or monthly volunteers. How many would it take? It'd take 100. Okay. I know math isn't maybe your skill set because you're in ministry. But if you had monthly volunteers, it would take 100 monthly volunteers to fill those 25 spots. Or you could fill those spots with bi-monthly volunteers or every other week volunteers, and it would take 50 volunteers because every volunteer counts as 2 for 1 to fill those 25 spots. So to fill the 25 spots, you would need 50. Or you could just recruit weekly volunteers. And how many would it take? It just take 25. 25 weekly volunteers, you fill those 25 spots. Now, more than likely, your situation isn't the first, okay, of where it takes 100 monthly volunteers to fill all your spots. You're probably somewhere in between the first example and the third example. For most people, it's like a patchwork of a combination of all those. It actually looks and feels like an algebra equation. Okay, because again, I know math probably isn't our strong point. So here's an example. Like this is what it could look like. This is what it probably looks like for many. So let's take those 25 spots again. Okay, you got 25 spots. Maybe you've got 20 monthly volunteers, and those 20 monthly volunteers, they actually fill 5 of those spots. Okay, 5 of those spots because you got 20 people who serve once a month. So maybe you got, you know, four here, four here, four. It's math, okay? Then you've got 30 volunteers who serve every other week, and those 30 volunteers make up 15 spots. And then maybe you got 5 volunteers who they just show up every week. They're there every week. And so between the 20 monthly volunteers, the 30 every other week volunteers, and the 5 weekly volunteers, you get 55 volunteers who fill your 25 spots. Now, that may seem complicated, but that's actually pretty normal. If you look at your roster, it probably looks something like this. You got this amalgamation of different frequencies that make up your weekly calendar. Okay, so for most ministries, it's a patchwork of schedules. But this issue about frequency, it demands a question. Okay, this is the question I want to ask you. How many volunteers would you prefer to fill those 25 spots? Okay, it's an honest question. And for you, it might not be 25 spots, it might be 100 spots or 75 spots. How many volunteers would you prefer to recruit to fill those 25 spots? Now, this is just me here, but if I had 25 spots to fill, wouldn't I want to try as hard as I could to fill those 25 spots with the least number of volunteers possible? That's what I would answer. I would think that the least. I mean, I don't want to recruit 100 people to work once a month to fill those 25 spots. Like the least amount of volunteers. I may not be able to get 25 weekly volunteers, but as close to that number as I can. That's what I would want. That's probably what you would want as well. I mean, if you get a smaller number of volunteers who can serve more frequently, then you're going to hit your goal faster. Like you're going to fill those 25 spots faster than you would otherwise. You're going to have less moving parts. Okay. When people call out or people are going on vacation, there's just less people to have to deal with. So it's less moving parts. And honestly, it's fewer people to lead. There's a cap on how many people we can lead. And if you got 100 volunteers, you're going to need help leading 100 volunteers. But 25 volunteers, you might by yourself be able to lead those 25. And you might need a little bit of help, but it's just fewer people to lead. I heard this quote a long time ago. Okay. And this quote is probably butchered, but I heard it and I don't even remember what it was in reference to, but I think it applies to this. And I think this quote goes something like this. I could haul a ton of gravel in the trunk of my Honda Civic, but it would be a lot easier if I used a truck. Does it make sense? Like I could haul a ton of gravel with the trunk of my Honda Civic, but you know what? It'd be way easier to do that with truck. And I think the same thing is true with volunteers. Like I could fill 25 slots with 100 volunteers, but it sure would be easier to do it with 25 or 30 or maybe 35 volunteers. It's definitely more efficient to have fewer volunteers who serve more often. So and plus this I'm just going to speak from my perspective a little bit. When I look at these volunteers who serve at more infrequent frequencies, again, this might just be my experience, but my weekly volunteers, they usually tend to be a lot more dependable and reliable. My weekly volunteers, they tend to be more prepared. Like it's just they do this so often. It's a rhythm. Like they're ready. They know what to do. They don't forget things. My weekly volunteers, they're usually better connected with the kids that they serve. They're better connected with the parents of the kids that are in their service. So I just find that volunteers who serve more frequently, they're just better volunteers. They're just more engaged. They're more reliable. All those things. So in regard to your chaotic volunteer schedule, what this whole course is about, getting more volunteers to serve more often will bring more peace to your schedule. You get that? So before we go any further, though, I've got to say what everybody's already thinking, or a lot of you are already thinking, and I call this the one service dilemma. The question is, but what happens if my church only has one service? Hey, that's a reality for a lot of churches. Not every church has 17 services on the weekend. Okay. A lot of churches just have one service. So, how in the world do you have weekly volunteers when your church only has one service? Well, listen, that is tricky. Like, that is a challenge because here's the reality: if your church only has one service, and your volunteers serve, then that means they don't get to go to service. And that's no bueno. Like that's no good. Like you don't want your volunteers to become disconnected from the church. They need to go to church. They need to experience the community of believers and to learn. And so I'm going to make two suggestions. Okay. And and hopefully this helps. And because some of this is also a mindset, I'm going to give you two practical solutions, but there's also a mindset here that I think might actually help. The first solution is this, and Nick, uh, who leads Ministry Boost with me, he shares this because this is something that he did at his church for a long time. But for a lot of churches that only have one service, that they want to get serious about this, is you might consider offering a volunteer service before your regular service. Okay. Like, because your ministry, your church has gotten so serious about how important it is to have weekly volunteers that you want to create a space where those volunteers can actually worship, even if there's not a dedicated worship service, an opportunity where they could worship and fill their cup before they go serve. And so what that might look like, it might mean that like during rehearsal, like when the band runs through all the songs one time beforehand, that your volunteers go in there and they get a chance to worship. And it's not exactly the same, but it's they get a chance to worship, and maybe there's a devotion, maybe the pastor, whoever's speaking, can share a little tidbit or a morsel of their service, or maybe it's you, maybe it's you who lead your ministry, you're going to share a devotion with them. But a lot of times in the world of church plants, there's a high emphasis on we got to rally volunteers are going to serve, but we know that we also need to feed these volunteers. And so that's one option of like figuring out how can you provide a meaningful worship service, like an opportunity where you pour into them before they serve. Or here's the other option, okay? And this one's um, it's not better, it's just different. And it might be that maybe you have to do every other week volunteers because you don't only have one service. But I would say put a twist onto it of, instead of you just like giving up and saying, well, I guess we're just going to have to do every other week volunteers. I would challenge you to say, no, I think you should recruit volunteers who see their role as a partnership with another person who's there when you're not there. So it's like it's a team approach to an every other week strategy. So it might be like, we'll just use Nick and I as an example. Maybe uh, Nick and I at the church we attend, let's pretend we live in the same town and we go to the same church, and say we're fifth grade small group leaders, and I serve every other week with Nick. And so, but he and I are in weekly communication, giving each other update of how Sunday went, and updating each other on like, hey, Matthew's going through this, and John was struggling with this, and here's what I did. And we're like working together. We're communicating to parents together. If for some reason I'm sick, I call Nick and he comes in and subs for me. And like we work on it together. And even to the degree of that, like before I go to service on the weekend that I'm not serving, I'm still going to come by and I'm going to high five all the kids in my group, and I'm going to tell them like, hey, I'll see you guys next week. I just wanted to come in and see you guys before. Like it's that kind of connection. And as the children's pastor, the children's director, it's not my responsibility to schedule. Oh, Nick, it's your turn, and Kenny, it's your turn. No, they're working together. Like we are one, and we manage our schedule, and it's going to be one of us there every week. So that might be the other way. The emphasis here is to begin thinking of like is about consistency. Is about like to make sure that for the kids and the families that are going to benefit from this volunteer role, that your volunteers are building consistency around that. And I think it has to be something that the whole church and leadership of the church prioritizes. I'll give this example. I used to work as a children's pastor at Mariners Church in Southern California, and I'd just been there for a few months, and I remember we were getting ready to go into the summer, and this is Southern California. The weather's great. The beach is just 5 minutes down the road. Disneyland. You got all these different distractions that would keep you from going to church on Saturday. And somebody had suggested the idea of like during the summer, we had two Saturday services. We had like a 4 o'clock and a 5:30 service. And somebody had thrown out the suggestion of like, hey, during the summer, should we like get rid of the 4 o'clock service and just have a 5:30 service? And we went around, this was on the executive team, and we went around the table And everybody at the table said, like, yeah, I don't see that as being a problem. I mean, neither one of the services are so full. We couldn't combine to just one. And we went around the table and everybody, who on that executive team was like, yeah, I don't see a problem with that. I don't see a problem with that. And then it got to me and I'm the kids pastor. And I was like, I think I kind of have a problem with getting rid of a service because if we got rid of the 4 o'clock service, then where would the 5:30 volunteers go to church? Like they need a place where they can worship and do that. And as right at that moment, then our lead pastor Eric Geiger, he was like, "That's it. Like we need to have 2 services. We got to have a place where these volunteers can serve." So I think it's a mentality. It's a mentality of the church. So you might face a situation where you only have one service, but there are solutions. And so I want to challenge you. And they may not be simple solutions, but I think there are solutions to how do you create consistency and a high level of ownership to where it's not more work for you, but there's level of ownership. So hopefully that helps a little bit. So if your church has 2 or more services, then there's no reason why volunteers can't serve every week. You can build weekly volunteer teams. Okay, so that's the one service dilemma. Let's move on though, because we talked a little bit about how convenient this might be for you as you manage your schedule and all those things, but that's actually not the main reason why you should consider a higher level of frequency for your volunteers. So I want to give the why reminder, the why this is so important. Okay, this is probably the most important reason. Okay, um, and I know that I'm probably preaching to the choir here because everything I'm going to tell you right now, you already know, or at least you should. However, if most of your volunteers don't serve consistently, then you might need this reminder too. Okay, but hopefully the words that I want to give you now are words that you should use as you talk to your every other week and once a month volunteers. As you are recruiting new volunteers, you should use these words. Okay, so write this down. Take notes. Okay, here's my first question: what's the purpose of kids ministry at your church? Like seriously, what's the purpose? Here's the answer I would give: the purpose of the kids ministry at my church is evangelism and discipleship. Okay, evangelism and discipleship for the next generation. See, there's a stat. This is a long old stat. It comes from Barna, but it's something that more than 80% of Christians came to faith between the ages of 4 and 14. So like this early like evangelistic movement in our church is happening in the hallways of our children's ministry. And so evangelism is a huge part of our children's ministry. So many kids will come to faith. So one of the reasons why our children's ministry exists is that it is actually the mechanism by which many of our kids and members of our church actually come to faith. And with discipleship, there's another really important stat, and this is a more recent stat from Barna, from Lifeway, from Fuller, from just about every denomination has done this study or these studies and found that far more than 50%, 60 to 80% of Christian kids walk away from their faith within just a few years of graduating from high school. And what we've been learning for all the studies that have been done by Barna, Fuller, and Orange, and all these different studies that have been done, they show how important the church is, specifically when the church partners with parents in helping believing kids, believers who are kids, actually stay in their faith. And so that's discipleship. So evangelism and discipleship is the answer to the question, like why does a children's ministry matter at your church? Well, it's evangelism and discipleship. And that leads me, if that's the answer to the first question, that leads me to the second question, which is this: is it possible to disciple kids when their leader is only there 1 or 2 times a month? No, seriously, I'm asking the question: is it possible for an adult leader to disciple kids when they only show up 1 or 2 times a month? Absolutely not. Like, no way. There's no way in any world that somebody who shows up once a month, and I'm not making fun of anyone. I'm not poking fun, but like just like do this thought exercise with me. Can a once a month volunteer disciple a kid? No. Like it doesn't happen. Like they may over the course of 12 months they might begin to build a relationship with a kid. Barely. But they're not going to disciple a kid. And so if discipleship is like a core purpose of our children's ministry, We got to have weekly volunteers. Like we have to have the consistency that shows up. I mean, let me ask you this question. How many of your adults are in small groups where they have a different leader every week? None of them. None of them, because it would be like ineffective. It like you wouldn't want that for yourself. So the question is like, why would we give that to our kids? So here's, and I think like, when people push back and say like, you're so crazy to demand weekly volunteers, like, isn't that's just so hard? Like, who's going to do that? And it just comes back to it again of like, this is discipleship. The window, the phase is such a narrow window when dynamic life change happens, and more so at this phase than any other phase. And it demands like consistency of leadership. And if we're going to disciple the next generation, it requires mature leaders who show up every week over the course of several years. Like, that's what discipleship is. That's how it happens. This isn't babysitting, this isn't childcare, this is discipleship. So leaders, as you're getting nervous about asking a volunteer who's been serving once a month for the last 20 years, and you get nervous about talking to them about maybe serving more often, just remember, this is discipleship. Okay? It's not babysitting. When you're getting nervous about talking to a new prospect, you're getting ready to have coffee with them and you're going to pitch the idea of like, hey, how great would it be to serve every week? And you're nervous about that, just remember, this is discipleship. Like, this is worthy of a big ask like that. So I actually think that when we frame the conversation, like when we're talking to new volunteers, we're talking to existing volunteers who serve infrequently, when we frame the conversation around the vision of discipleship and how much it matters and how it actually can function or doesn't function, I think when you lay that conversation out, everybody in the conversation will come to the same conclusion that if we want to disciple the next generation, it's going to require more than once a month volunteers and every other week volunteers. Right? I think so. That's what my experience has been. So let's get into a little bit more nitty gritty. Let's get into a little bit more of the practical. So if moving to weekly volunteers is the thing for you, you're going to give this a shot. I actually think there's a few things that you have to do before you start inviting people to serve every week. There's some, or at least you have to be doing it as you're making that invite, because I think there's some shifts that you need to make for your ministry. Like, these things have to change in order for you to invite people to serve weekly, to disciple kids in that way. So let me kind of unpack these one at a time. The first one is you have to become intentional about groups, about community. Okay, this is what it means. If you ask somebody to begin showing up every week to serve, then you have to put them in a room and put certain kids in that room, and don't move that volunteer out of that room. Like, all of a sudden, when another volunteer in another room calls in sick, you can't move that volunteer over there. Like, you need to solve that problem separately, because you made an agreement with this volunteer. I need you here every week because I need you to disciple these kids. So I'm going to make sure that these kids are with you every week, and I'm going to make sure that you're in that room with those kids so you can disciple them. So a shift that you have to make is you can't move volunteers anymore. I know sometimes it's like a Jenga puzzle. It's like a Tetris puzzle that we're moving volunteers. Like, as volunteers are coming in, you move, oh, can I move you over here? Stop it. Stop it. Like, especially in early childhood, you want to move to fix it. You have to find another way to fix it. This is why you need to like really rely on your subs. So that way, when one of your regular volunteers calls out, you put a sub in there, not your weekly volunteers. Okay. So the shift in your mindset is you don't move volunteers anymore. You have made a commitment to them. They've made a commitment to you. You both need to honor it. Okay. So the first shift is be intentional about groups and community. Okay. Kids and leaders are going to experience community together every week. So don't mess it up. Okay. So that's the first shift. Second shift, be intentional about care. Okay. Care for your volunteers. Like, you need to make the experience of serving on the children's ministry team stellar. Like, it needs to be amazing. Okay. Like, where you just like, they feel that because they serve every week, they are being cared for, they're known. And listen, listen, if you've cut the number of volunteers you need down into half or a quarter, you should have more time to lean in and care for these volunteers. In a previous session, we talked about coaches and quality volunteers. This is the beauty of coaches. If you can put a coach over 10 to 12 volunteers or 12 to 15 volunteers, and you encourage those coaches, hey, on a weekly basis, send a text to the text thread, check in on your volunteers, pray for them, ask them what they need, what they need prayer for, those sorts of things. And you'll begin to provide a level of care that those volunteers are going to feel like, I am so glad I am in this community of service and I do this every week, but I'm known by people, I'm cared for by people. So you have to create an intentional environment of care for your volunteers. Okay, third one, and this is a fun one. Remove any and every obstacle or reason why they shouldn't do this weekly. Okay, because listen, serving weekly is not easy. It's hard, and they know it's hard, and so you and your ministry should do everything possible to remove the barriers or remove the reasons why they wouldn't do it. Okay, couple things. I'm a big advocate of feeding your volunteers. Like, create a space where you got some donuts, some fruit, some coffee, some sodas, some juices. Like, it's not cheap. And some churches, like, we don't have the kind of money for that. Then get some volunteers who love to cook and love to have a gift for hospitality. And you may not be able to do this every week. Maybe you could do this once a month or twice a month and have some volunteers bring food in, but like, love your volunteers with food, because there's a lot of volunteers that they're running out. They got kids and they're running out that door, and they didn't quite get to eat, and so they're hungry. Their kids are hungry, and if you can love your volunteers with some sustenance, that's going to go a long way. They're going to feel like, this is great. Like, my kids get to come with me, and they get a donut, and they get some juice, they get some, a Coke, maybe for an afternoon service, and it's great. Okay, you can do that, or sometimes it's just like the swag. Like, get your kids. We just I'm a big fan of giving your volunteers t-shirts, give them water bottles, appreciate them. Like, just do all the things that you can appreciate them. Here's another big thing: take care of their kids. If you got volunteers who serve every week and they have elementary age kids, this is like a next level ninja move. Create a space for volunteer kids to hang for the second service that they're there, because elementary age kids, they don't want to go to the same service twice. It's boring. They don't want to do that. They may have loved it for one service. They're going to hate it for the second service. So create a space where they can play video games. They can watch movies. They can play with Legos. They can do puzzles. They can just hang out with their friends, because they're going to become friends with other volunteer kids. And if you create a space like that and the kids love being there for two services, then your volunteers are going to be there for a long time, because their kids love it. They love it. They're there for two services. Do that. Like, it's huge. It's great. Create like an in-crowd culture. Like, there's momentum, there's excitement, as there's a great reason to be a volunteer. So those are the shifts that you need to make and to create, to make it really easy for people to say yes to serving every week. Because these volunteers are going to give a lot. They're going to give more than they ever have before. But if you do your job right, they'll get more out of it than they ever give. And they'll be so grateful. They will get more out of it than they ever give. And secondly, if you do your job right, they will make serving a multi-year lifestyle. Like, it becomes a part of who they are. It becomes a part of their weekly experience. So serving weekly is a big win for everyone, for you, for your volunteers, and for the kids and the families that they're serving. So weekly is huge. Okay, let me share just one more thing with you here. Actually, moving to weekly. Okay, moving to weekly. I want to give you a couple pointers on how to make this transition. It's a little scary to do, because you might be thinking, like, in your head, like, well, what happens if I throw out this, this ultimatum, or this, like, hey, we got to move weekly, and what happens if everyone says no? Like, what happens if a lot of people say no? So remember, if your volunteers currently serve every other week, only half of them have to say yes to this. and you're right exactly where you are now. Only half. So you only have to like hit 50% or better and you're ahead. Okay. I've done this at multiple churches. I think 3 different churches. Every single time I've moved to weekly, I always net resulted better than I was before. Like I did have some people say, I can't do it. Like I can't do it. And they ended up just moving into a sub role where they served once a month or maybe even twice a month in a sub role. Or maybe we found a sub role, kind of a more permanent sub role as a assistant leader, co-leader to a group. But in the end, because I moved to weekly, I ended up having more net volunteers than I did before every single time. Now, I actually have this one leader who has told me, and this is a conversation Nick and I share, um, that he tried this and it went terrible for him. Like a lot of his volunteers, like most of his volunteers, said no, and he ended up losing a lot of volunteers. But here's the funny part: even though this initiative for him bombed, he's to this day he still says, "I'm glad I did it." Like if I could had to do it over again, I'd do it again because what I did was it helped me remove the volunteers that weren't going to help us get to the culture and the volunteer team that we needed. And by them saying no, it freed open their spaces for people who would say yes. Um, so here's some things that you need to know, okay? In moving to weekly. Here's what I was suggesting. And listen, not only have I done this before multiple times, I'm doing it right now. Okay. I'm working with a church right now, and I'm doing the same exact things. I'm telling you, I'm doing it right now with the church that I'm working with. So, first thing, okay, cast vision like it's your part time job. Okay. Anytime you talk to anyone, talk about discipleship, talk about small groups, talk about volunteers who show up weekly, like bore them to death with vision of people who serve weekly and how it disciples kids and all those things. So you're constantly talking about because what you have to do is you have to start like you're creating a common language that people hear so frequently. All of a sudden they didn't know it existed and now they begin to believe that it's true. Okay. So the first thing is just cast vision, like it's your part-time job. Second, meet with all your volunteers. Okay. Meet with all your volunteers individually. Okay, meet with all your volunteers individually. I'm doing this right now. It takes a lot of time. I mean, I'm in the process of meeting with every single one of my volunteers individually for about 90 minutes. Okay, 60 to 90 minutes. It's an opportunity for me to get to know them, to talk with them, to get feedback from them. How's your experience been? Tell me about, and I'm new where I'm at, so I'm asking them questions about how long they've been serving. Like I'm getting to know them, but then I have an opportunity to cast vision specifically to them. Like, hey, let me tell you about what I believe about discipleship. Let me tell you about what I believe about a relationally connected ministry. And I have an opportunity, and then I have an opportunity to ask them personally, what would it look like for you to serve in this way? Like to serve to like to truly disciple a group of kids. Like it's an amazing conversation. And you'd be amazed as you lay out the framework of that conversation, how many people are like, I love the kids that I get to work with. And I'd have to figure that out, but yeah, I think I could probably do that. I think I could probably figure that out. Like have conversations with people individually. And then the last thing is set a transition date for the entire ministry. And for me, it rarely for me is like September 2nd. Like usually I would say like, hey, we're probably looking at a January launch, or we're looking at a fall launch after the summer. We're gonna move. We're gonna move to this. We're gonna move to small groups and weekly volunteers. So I give them an idea in mind that hey, in the fall we're gonna do this, or in the new year we're gonna do this. And so give them a date. Let them know that it's coming, and they can begin thinking about it. And those are the issues. So let me give you another thing too. Let me give you some talking points. These are things that I like to talk about when I'm having this conversation with weekly, because there's always going to be a conversation. People are going to push back. People are going to ask, like, tell me more about what it looks like to serve every week. Like how one of the questions people ask all the time is like, well, how long is this commitment? Like, when I sign up for this, how long is this? And I always respond. It's always kind of funny. I always respond like, well, until Jesus comes back. You know, because and they laugh. I actually said that today. I was in a meeting with somebody and I said that and I laughed, and then I followed up immediately and said, listen, if I do my job right, then this opportunity becomes your favorite thing about the weekend. Like you cannot wait until the weekend to see your kids. And so it's not the it's asking how long do I do this is a wrong question, because this becomes something that you're so filled with joy about that you're going to do this long term. And the answer to that is usually like it's probably 2 or 3 years. Like that's how long most of my volunteers do it. They do it for 2 or 3 years. They walk with kids through a season of their life, and then they pass them off to the next leader. Okay, so I like to talk to people about the commitment, and we're talking long term. Like this is everyone does this for multiple years because they love it. They love it. It's purposeful. It's meaningful. Here's another talking point. Okay, this comes up a lot of times. People ask, like, "Man, every week seems like a lot." I travel for work sometimes. We go on vacation a lot in the summer. My kids get sick a lot. There's These are all the different things. And here's what and this is probably my conversation has changed some since COVID. And I would say that every week isn't every week. Okay, every week isn't really every week, because every week somebody's going to get sick. Somebody's going to be on vacation. Somebody's going to be on a business trip. Like it happens. Like life happens. I'm not even there every week. Like I have things that come up and I'm like in charge. Okay. So it's reframing what every week looks like. The reality is what I would say it's like since COVID, it's every week looks more like maybe 7 out of every 8 weeks. Maybe sometimes it's 3 out of 4 weeks. You're there. Like, and here's probably the biggest mindset is that there's not like when you sign on to this to weekly, there's not a week that you just come to church and then go home. Like that doesn't happen anymore. When you come to church, you attend and you serve. Like that's the only times you don't serve is when you're not there at all because you're sick, you're out of town. Maybe you needed a mental health day. Like maybe that's the case, but it's a mindset shift of like, no, Sundays is about serving. Sundays is about attending and being with my crew. And so sometimes I've had that conversation with a volunteer about it's not every week. Like it's it's most weeks, but it's not every week. Like this isn't a prison sentence. Okay. There's room. Like I even tell volunteers sometimes too, like I don't want you to burn it. I want you to do this for the long haul. So if you need to take 3 or 4 weeks off, take 3 or 4 weeks off. Like we'll figure this out. We'll work on it together. And because I want you to do this for the long haul. Okay, here's one more talking point. People sometimes that maybe they're just like they're stuck and they're like, I just don't know. Every week just seems too hard. I wonder if and usually I say stop. Okay, listen. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to try it. Would you try it for 3 months? Because here's what's going to happen. If you try it for 3 months, I promise you this is what's going to happen. You're going to come find me and you're going to thank me for making you try it because it was so much more than you expected. Every single time I've had that conversation, probably on a monthly basis with a potential volunteer. And I have to get to the point where I say, look at me. I promise you, you're going to thank me. And every single time, I've never had anyone come up and say, "I can't believe you made me do that." Okay, so those are like literal talking points I have with volunteers who push back, who are concerned, who have questions. Like this is discipleship. There's a cost to it. Like it's hard, it's not easy, but it's so good and it's so fulfilling and it fills our cup and it gives back to us so much more than we ever give out. So you see how this works? Like when you think about your crazy chaotic schedule and you've got all these volunteers and all these schedules, can you imagine how much time you're going to save when you just have less people to have to manage? When the majority of the people on your schedule, like they serve in the same room, in the same spot every week. So scheduling means just copy and paste from last month and copy and paste from the month before. Like it brings peace to the chaotic schedule by helping your existing volunteers and future volunteers capture a vision for what it looks like to serve every week. It's so freaking amazing. It's so easy. Imagine that schedule. So, one of the next steps, okay, we've actually created a course. Nick Blevins created a course several years ago called Frequency. Like I gave you a very like 30,000 foot view, high level view of what frequency looks like. If you're a member with Ministry Boost, you have full access to that course. If you're not a member, you can purchase it for $97, I think. But it will literally walk you through the process of exactly what I talked about, but with email scripts and conversation scripts on how to lead your volunteers towards serving on a weekly schedule. Okay. All right. So that's one more schedule. I'm sorry, one more issue solved to calming our chaotic volunteer schedule. Prioritize weekly volunteers. Consistent volunteers, get consistent volunteers, and your crazy roster is going to come into order. Okay. All right. We'll see you in the next session as we talk about one more issue that I think is so important and is so practical. It's maybe the most practical of all the issues we talked about so far, and it's something that you can start doing right away. So we'll see you in the next session.
What's up?
Yo,
So,
did you feel like I was plagiarizing your course? Because that's most of what I did in this session here.
it's all good. All good to me. Sorry for my hand in the screen here. I feel like my kids have come in here and not only took my iPad earlier, like I told you about, but messed up some things. Would you know our friend that did this and a bunch of volunteers quit that you referenced?
Mhm.
I feel
Yeah,
like
yeah.
if anybody's watching this, live or even on the site before it's just in the course, then they get this part. The huge caveat to his whole thing was he didn't just go from like one model to a weekly model. It was also two other big changes that all at the same time. It was a traditional church that was more of a Sunday school model, and he was ditching that for a large group kids model, and he changed curriculum. It was all three at once. So like he lost all his volunteers, but
which may not be
three
the
massive changes
recommended.
Yeah,
That may not be. We're not telling you to do that. Okay,
no,
we're tackle one
no.
thing at a time.
And
And
it's like you said, he would do it all over again. He created what he wanted. It was harder and a little messier and all that kind of stuff, but he created what he wanted and he'd do it all over again. And I was just telling somebody this recently. We had a local kids pastor in and we're sharing with him and we're talking about pushing him to weekly. It's a church plant, but I mean, for a church plant, they're pretty large now, 500, they're now 6 years old. 6 years old. Yeah. They survived COVID pretty well. Obviously that hit them hard like it did a lot of people, but they've bounced back in a big way. So they're not your typical church plant in the sense, being 500 or whatever, but he has a lot of, volunteers that aren't weekly, even though they have two services and all that. And we were talking through this and I told him, I should keep better track of this, but I don't know anybody that's lost more than 40%. Like, I don't even know anybody that's lost half. You know what I mean? Like if you go from bi-weekly to weekly, if you lose half, you still have the same number of volunteers, right? This math again. But personally, I don't even know anybody that's lost 50%. So like everybody I know has gained something,
Right.
But even if you lost 60, right? 60%, it's like, okay, I'm a little shorter, but now you have, like, to go back to the math again, let's say it was, I'm going to use 100, it's a big round number, 100 that serve every other week, and you lose 60% of them, like only 40 say yes to weekly. Big deal. You got 60 people that could be subs for 10 spots until you fill those other 10 spots. You know what I mean? Like, you should be good. You're 40 weekly, and 60 subs to fill 10 spots a week is pretty good.
Yeah, because all those people who say no, you probably won't lose them as volunteers. They're going to say like, well, just put me in once a month. Put me in whatever. So like in the end, you're still going to net positive. And here's what I would say too, because this is what I'm dealing with right now in my church. Is we have 3 different rotations. We have a bunch of weekly volunteers, we have a bunch of every other week volunteers, and we have a bunch of once a month volunteers. And so basically, all my once a month volunteers, they're not once a month volunteers. They're just subs. I just call them subs. No, we schedule them once a month, but terminology wise, is they're not a real volunteer. I mean, they're not going to be a small group leader. And so the goal is like I'm trying to get as many weekly volunteers. I'm always going to have, like, I would even say, like, at the healthiest I've ever had it, I had probably like 85% were weekly and 15% were every other week. And a lot of those people served in like roles that it didn't matter as much. They served in guest services. They served on as hosts or storytellers. And so, which was fine. So you're probably, if you're at 75, 80, 85% weekly, you're golden. Like you're golden. Just imagine how easy it is to schedule those volunteers. And I would even say like, I don't know, like I think even at the peak of my time in Arizona where I really crafted this, I still had in all of my service, I still had like a handful, like maybe in all of my early childhood, I might have had like 7 volunteers that were still on an every other week volunteer rotation. They were volunteers I did not want to lose. And we had working agreements with them of like, I'm going to attach you to this volunteer and you two work together. Like it was very intentional. Like I am bending the rules to let you stay
Mm-hmm.
in here. Um, because you know me, I want weekly, but I'm going to let you
Mm-hmm.
stay in here. But this is what you have to do. So it's okay. Like it's okay. But you want the momentum to be around weekly volunteers. And one of the tricks, and you can speak to this too, Nick, I found is that like as I started making this move, I did it in groups. Like I never did this like church wide or ministry wide everywhere. Like I tackled elementary first. And because we're going to throw all our eggs in there, and even we focused on like when people started saying yes, or like I'll use example in early childhood, when people started saying yes, I started even one room at a time. Like I would do like the baby room first, and then because what I wanted to do is I hated to have a room where half the volunteers were every other week and half were weekly, because then it created this weird dynamic of like, well, why aren't they serving every week? So I kind of like to go a room at a time and win them over, and then if people were every other week, I'd move them to another room so I could fill that room up with weekly volunteers, and I built momentum that way. And once I got it, we stayed. It stayed. Like it clicked, and then we never went backwards again.
Yeah, it's also helpful too. Like when you're recruiting new ones, you're saying, "Here's the commitment's weekly." It would be
Mm-hmm.
tough to recruit a new volunteer, tell them it's weekly, stick them in a room where somebody's not weekly. It's like,
Yes,
you
and I have done
sure?
this though because you have to start somewhere, and so there have been times where I've recruited volunteers, and I say, listen, let me tell you a little bit about what you're walking into. Like I need your help. We're transitioning this ministry to weekly, and we're not all there yet. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you might have to make a caveat and say like, hey, within the next month or two, everyone in your room is going to be weekly, but they're not weekly yet. So just and if you cast that vision, they'll get it. Like you're not going to lose them in that process. But if you drop the ball and 6 months later there's still every other week people in there, you might lose your weekly people to every other week schedules as well.
Well, yeah, part of it is the new weekly person. Like they should feel proud about the fact that they're part of this new initiative with a bigger commitment, and you're expecting
Yeah.
more of them. Hopefully, they're looking
Hmm.
at the other people in the room that are serving bi-weekly, like, why don't you do this?
Yeah.
You've been here, you care about this. You care. Why don't you do this?
And it does work. There is an aspect of peer pressure that happens because I have seen
Oh,
this
sure.
over and over and over again, where there are volunteers that serve every other week that they literally get jealous because the kids are more attached to the volunteers that are there every week, and they feel left out. They feel FOMO, and they're
Yeah,
like, all right, sign me up. I don't, I want
yeah.
to, I didn't want to, I feel like a slacker here. And I'm like, well, I mean, I didn't
He,
say it, but
but it is true. Uh, Two things I just thought of. So today in our next gen team meeting, we were like evaluating Jingle Jam, this big event we did for families on Friday. It's the first time we did it for parents and kids. One of the pieces of feedback, which just is like obviously not a core thing, but it was a small thing, was that it was really cool that a lot of the weekly leaders from preschool and elementary were there, either because they have
mm,
kids there or they were serving at it or whatever. And kids who have been in their groups or are in their groups were going up to them. So like there were multiple stories
mm,
that our team was telling about, like my one of the ladies on our staff, Jennifer, she was talking about how her kids went up to their leader, and then her kids, and she even said, and then this is where kind of like it wasn't about Jingle Jam anymore, but she was saying like they will even on Sunday mornings they will go to the front of the auditorium before the probably the second service, I guess, and to the wing where the Jaegers always sit because they were their small group leaders when her kids were 4 and 5, and
mm.
her kids are now 11 and 9. So think about like the impact that those small group leaders made when those kids were 4 and 5. So that's 5-6 years ago for these kids. And because of that impact, they still connect with them today in a survey. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
They'll go say hi to them. They go hang out with them. They have fun. They have like a secret handshake or something with Mr. John, and it's like
that's funny.
that's what we're talking about. It's hard to
Mm,
get there with if Mr. John was monthly and his wife Lisa, if they were bi-weekly or something like that, like that's the kind of thing you want to create with weekly. And once you do, it's like, oh man, you never want to go back.
yeah, it is. It's a game changer. It's a game changer. So this is a big one. So let's recap. We talked about quantity volunteers. We need to recruit more. We talked about some of the things we have to do just to get more humans in the room, and that's going to be huge because a lot of our schedule is just we're moving subs around just to fill in empty spots. We need to up the quality volunteers, which kind of ties into what we talked about today. But one of the angles we talked about was like we just ask for more. We ask for a bigger commitment. We ask for higher level of expectations, and there are people that they want to do more. They want to do something bigger, especially in the realm of coaches. If we can get uh, our best volunteers to step into a coach role, they will help us fill the gaps. They will actually help us manage the schedule that is creating so much chaos. And then today we talked about in this session we talked about frequency, moving more volunteers to serving every week, and just reduces the total overall number of volunteers that we need, and which makes our schedule, our roster, way simpler, like way easier to do. And so in our next session, we're gonna talk about the system, because I think I am the church that I'm working with right now. Um, they are scheduling. There's a little bit of a monthly approach to it, but for the most part, the schedule is a weekly thing, and I think that's a major reason why it's chaos, is because we see it weekly when we should be looking at it monthly. I think it's kind of funny because my preschool director that I hired in Arizona, her name was Mickey, and I remember she was in a coaching group with me a year and a half ago, and it was in June, I think, or maybe May, and we were talking about, hey, what are we working on right? What's everyone working on right now? And it was May, and Mickey was like, I'm just finishing getting all the subs in place for the summer. And I was like, what do you mean for the summer? She goes, yeah, I made up the summer schedule and it's almost all done. And I just got to find 3 or 4 more subs, and the whole schedule will be ready for June, July, and August. And I'm like, that's amazing. Like
Yeah.
who schedules a quarter at a time? Like nobody does,
Yeah.
but you can. Like
Yeah.
if you
You
have
totally can.
weekly volunteers, and most people have a pretty good idea of what they're, unless somebody gets sick or a last minute vacation comes up. But like we can live like free of the tyranny of the urgent, and just like and spend an hour a week like just updating the schedule that we set 3 weeks ago. So
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
pretty
I
cool
mean, like
thing.
our element in elementary, we have weekly small group leaders, so there's no scheduling there. But we do, as you know, our large group, we do once a month. You serve all 3 services, or 2 services if there was only two. And um, so that schedule, the large group schedule, because you're serving once every month, for all the services, there is a sheet, a Google sheet, but it's quarterly. So I just
Hmm.
saw the other day the
Oh yeah.
January through March schedule is done. Um,
Hmm.
and I do it, a few times. I'll host in there over a few months in different environments, and so had to go figure out where I am and make some tweaks or whatever. But it's like the whole thing is pretty much done for the next quarter, and so
Yeah.
like the amount of time that my elementary director has to spend on scheduling is very minimal. Just
And this is the reason for the course, because there's so many people that are like, what percentage of your week is spent on the schedule? And for some, it's like 20%, 30%. Gosh, when I was at Mariners, for some of them it was like 50 or 60%. So it's not good. No bueno. Like stop it. Like let's get the system. Let's get all these things. So
right.
hopefully that's helpful. So that's our next session is going to be on, and this one won't be live. We're going to throw it out there in a week,
Look forward
and
in the course. Right.
look for it in the course. And it'll be systems. It'll be the big practical, and we'll share. I'll share the template, because I'm not as computer savvy as I am. I still refuse to use scheduling software because I like my spreadsheet. So I'm just gonna show. Now you could probably use Planning Center or Rock or CCB. Like you could probably do it there. You're gonna figure that out. I'm gonna share with you my spreadsheet and how I schedule monthly on my spreadsheet. I'll literally show you how I do it and share an example of my spreadsheet. So if you want to borrow my spreadsheet, you can, or you can take it and apply it to whatever scheduling software you use, and you can win with that.
I may or may not be teeing up an email to some software company
Yeah.
to have conversations. So maybe people can hear about that later in the course.
And that is, I am actually learning Planning Center. The church I'm at uses Planning Center, and so far, I'm kind of in love. There's a lot of things that do really great, and I'm excited about it. And I have used Planning Center services before over the years. Primarily, I've used it for just scheduling the services, like the large group experience. I've played around with the volunteer thing, and I haven't been super excited about it. But I think it's because maybe I haven't used it the right way. So, but if we can meet with the people at Planning Center and partner up there, there might be something beautiful here. So we'll see.
Right.
We'll see what happens.
We'll see. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
See everybody.
Bye.